One of my friends was not careful on the deep web, and this actually happened to him a few years ago. I think around 2016, my friend, which we'll call him Eric for the sake of this story. Eric wasn't on his graduating year, and he had experience with, computers. Although he may not be the greatest at them, he has done some pretty good things with this computers during school. In other words, he had been kind of like a mechanicness, I guess you could say, for computers. He mostly worked with electronics, and whenever he did, he would always make sure that everyone is happy. However, though, one day, he's discovered something really freaky. He was home alone one night, and he was looking online when someone told him to take a look at the deep web. Now, Eric was kind of hesitant about this, as he's never heard of the deep web, but after what his friend Anthony told him, he decided to go take a look at it for himself. When Eric looked up on the deep web, he had to get Tor browser, and he would have to use the Tor browser to get him there, as Google or Firefox will not do that. Once Eric got in, he ended up looking around some certain forums, and he looked to see that they were pretty amazing saying forum names. What I mean by amazing is that there were a lot of messed up stuff content that was in it, such as illegal stuff, and at this point Eric at this point was kind of confused and curious. He was checking out more and more, and the more he checked out, the more he's putting himself through. He ended up looking over to see that he couldn't find anybody, but anyone on the internet, that is, that he knows. Most of the people were remaining anonymous for other reasons to protect protect their IP. Now, of course, Eric started going through them, such as finding some pretty interesting stuff. But then he came across what seemed to be a really weird forum. He came across a forum where it had, some photos those of really illegal and messed up stuff. I'm not even going to say it, but you could probably imagine, if you've been on the deep web, you'd probably know what you're in for. Of course, Eric was about to turn around, but curiosity got the better of him, and he continued to go through more and more into the deep web. Although he wished he was more careful, though. But as he was going on more and more, he ended up looking over to see that there was this little link. He couldn't remember the link, so he clicked on the link, which took him to be a video. The video was that of a man and his girlfriend, and seemed to be in the room. While they were in the room, whatever this guy wore some sort of mask, came in holding a gun. Of course, Eric was quite confused, but also scared of what the heck was going on. But of course, he saw that the girlfriend and her boyfriend were shot. Now, I'm not going to describe how gruesome it was, but it was pretty graphic, like if you were to see it for yourself. Eric immediately closed off the browser, and he uninstalled Tor and never went back on there since. Although, he did not even know why he went on the deep web, but it was certain that he saw something he didn't want to see. He still to this day have no idea why he went on the deep web, but he knows for a fact that he will never be returning to the deep web again. And he does not even know if that video is still up or if that was a live stream of some sort. He is not returning to find out, and nothing like this has ever happened since. And he's glad that nothing like that has happened, and he's never returned to the deep web since then. And he's never going on the deep web again. This happened to my friend named Jack at this time of the story, and this was about, I guess, 2012, and he discovered something that he wished he hadn't. Now, Jack was about maybe 16 years old at the time, and he was a very smart student. A lot of people at high school referred to him as the nerd of the school, as he helped people with homework and that, basically helping them study. But when people want him to cheat, like copying off homework or something, Jack will not allow it. He was a very smart dude, and he was really kind. But at the time of this story that it happened, it honestly was pretty freaky. Since this happened in 2012, and it was during the fall, and I was on my freshman year, Jack had discovered something called the Deep Web. Now, Jack didn't know anything about it at the time, so Jack was just doing his homework one day when one of his friends, which we'll assume was named Paul, asked him to go check out the Deep Web, as he said to him that he could find lots of legal stuff and things that no other site will allow. Now, Jack at the time decided to take a look at least once. By start off, he had to download the Tor browser, and he scrolled through forums once he was in. Lots of forums contained stuff that were illegal, and even stuff that was messed up. Since Jack didn't click on those links, he found what seemed to be a store where he clicked on the link, and it took him to what seemed to be a really large store. They sold a lot of drugs and even weapons and all sorts of things that the Deep Web can hide and even show. Now, Jack was honestly confused, but didn't even know what he was doing at the time. He ended up looking over, and then suddenly there was this chat box that popped up. He couldn't remember the user's name, but the user asked him if he was new, which Jack said yes, and explained that his friend asked him to check the Deep Web out. Although Jack wasn't very careful, as he wished he was. But at that moment, Jack started to talk to this random dude, which he had no idea who it was on the other side. As Jack was looking more on the internet and even the Deep Web, he looked to see that this guy asked him to do something like buy him something illegal. Jack immediately told him no and that it was not a good idea, but this guy insisted that he does. Since Jack was 16, he told him that he will report it to the authorities. Then he uninstalled Tor browser and then closed up his laptop for the day. A few days later, Jack was home alone and he was watching his sister when all of a sudden he could see someone at the back door knocking. It was pretty loud, and Jack looked up to see that there was a group of men. He got out his phone and called 911 and raced out of the front of the yard. As soon as he got out of the front of the house, he ended up taking his sister, which his sister at first was confused, but they went over to the neighbor's yard. As soon as they got there, they called the police there and explained to them about the situation. Now, the police weren't able to find those men, as those men were probably around 3 or 4 men dressed in black had escaped. Jack had never went to the Deep Web since, and he's never told his parents about this, and he still wonder why these people were there, but he does not want to know why they were there for him. He was thinking they were here to kill him or even kidnap him or do God knows what. But Jack will never be returning to the Deep Web again, not after this experience. Now, this happened at least to one of my neighbors, which his name was Dylan, and this happened sometime in 2015. Now, this was during the summertime, and Dylan lived in my same neighborhood as I was back then. And Dylan, however, was a cop. As Dylan was a cop, he had explored many places on the internet revolving cybercrimes, which he mostly gets called in for. Sometimes he would get called in for arguments and etc. But however, as Dylan ended up looking over, he could see that one of his friends went on the Deep Web. One of his friends' names, which we'll call him Jaden. Jaden at the time was around Dylan's age. He was looking on the Deep Web and chatting with some people he didn't know. Mainly for something that he didn't really know. Probably something illegal. Dylan at the time was messaging some random people about certain things, and at this time Dylan got suspicious about his buddy. But as day went on, Dylan had not heard from Jaden in a few days and thought that maybe he would go to his house to check on him. But as Dylan entered the house one day while on his shift on his break, he looked to see that his friend Jaden was on the ground dead. He didn't have any bruises or anything, but it looked like that he might have been drugged up or something. he looked to see that his beer bottle, and it looked like it had been spiked with something. Dylan looked over to see that there was a man holding an axe, and he had a mask that looked like a pig mask. He obviously looked up at Dylan, and Dylan drew the gun and told him to put the axe down, but he refused. He just stood there, and he had no idea what he was going in for. So the guy dropped his axe and ran off. Of course, this really messed Dylan up a bit. He had no idea what happened or why this guy was in there with an axe, but he called for backup, and they came to collect Jaden's body and took him to the hospital. Jaden, however, did not make it, as he was pronounced dead for a couple of hours, or days, of course. But Dylan had no idea why this guy showed up. But then he found out the disturbing truth. Jaden had told this guy that he didn't want anything such as just anything illegal, even though this guy who Dylan faced with wanted something illegal. But of course, Dylan told him no, and this guy somehow found out his address and went over there and drugged up his drink. At the time of this story, I still have no idea why this happened, but this is the reason why I do not go on the deep web. Never have and never will. And Dylan has never been on the deep web, and he has no idea why Jaden was on the deep web, but he still wonders about this to this day, and this still really frightens him a bit, and even unnerves him every time he thinks about it.